Welcome to the New Economy. What's next? My guest today is Mr. Kevin Sullivan. He is an AML educator and consultant, and he's author of the book, The Anti-Money Laundering in a Nutshell, Awareness and Compliance for Financial Personnel and Business Managers. So stay tuned. We're going to talk about the wonderful, exciting world of compliance and anti-money laundering.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, it's a real police car chase.
One by one, employees from the tourism sector show up here at the National Insurance Board seeking financial assistance.
Wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, except that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who that it's naming, for the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, it's a real police car chase.
So, Mr. Sullivan, tell me about
Kevin. It's Kevin. You call me Mr. Sullivan again, I'm gonna dig my father up from the cemetery and wheel him out here. I'm Kevin.
Okay, Kevin.
But
now, you're not the typical AML compliance person. How did you get involved? How did you come to AML and compliance?
Well, I started out. I was in law enforcement. I worked for the New York State Police. And I did the usual law enforcement stuff when I first started out as a young state trooper. I earned a nice big hat, and I eventually got into undercover narcotics. And when I was in narcotics, and that was interesting, buying crack and coke, and that was quite. There's some stories there, believe me. But and from that, I remember saying one day to the boss, because we kept going to the same neighborhoods and buying drugs, and it was so easy. I mean, they were just throwing drugs at me. And I remember opening my big mouth and said, "Hey, boss, what is this? We don't seem to be accomplishing anything here. We arrest people and some new face takes over the next day, and nothing seems to change. What's all this money stuff? I've heard that term, follow the money. What does that mean? What does all that stuff mean?" And he just looked at me real sarcastic and said, "Yeah, Sullivan, why don't you take care of that yourself?" So that just kind of got my Irish up a little bit. And I said, "Okay, you son of a gun, I will." And I started to go out and learn about money laundering and fraud and the whole financial aspects of it. So next thing I know, I get transferred to major crimes, and there was a huge mall right by where our barracks was, and I started getting all these financial cases, credit card cases.
And this is in New York City.
It was right outside of New York
Okay.
City. It was initial suburbs,
Mm-hmm.
and I started getting into these financial things, and I got involved with an FBI task force on white collar crime. And that's where I started to see the money laundering aspect, because I saw the predicate crimes, the credit card stuff, and the ID thefts. But now I started to see the money laundering aspects of it too. And so I knew that I needed to keep my education going. So I got the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and then I went back to university to a master's degree in economic crime management up at Utica College of Syracuse. And then from there, I got asked by the big boss, the superintendent of state police, calls me up on the phone one day and says, "Hey, Sullivan, how'd you like to go down to this new unit they're starting down in Manhattan on financial crimes?" And of course, I don't even think it's the boss. I think it's just somebody pulling my leg. which happens a lot in the police force. We do that a lot. We screw around with each other. And so, of course, I called him a few names. And he said, no, really, this is the superintendent. And I said, oh, crap. So he said, I'll forgive you for that. And are you still interested in that job? I said, well, how long do I have to decide? He said, till I hang up the phone. I said, okay, I'll take it. Next thing I know, I'm shipped down to Manhattan, and I'm involved in something called the High Intensity Financial Crime Area, the New York HIFCA, which is part of the El Dorado Task Force, which is the largest money laundering task force in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm starting to apply all the things I learned at university
Mm-hmm.
and in the FBI task force, putting it all together, and it just exploded from there. And then who knew 9/11 was going to happen?
Yeah. Well,
then
I mean,
terrorist financing came big.
yeah. I mean, before we get to that, your experience has kind of taught you how money laundering happens from the ground up. It's not just something that is done in financial institutions. There truly is a trail of how money moves.
And that's exactly what I try to teach people when I go into banks, because most financial institution employees have never seen that aspect of it. All they know is that the computer generated some activity, and now that piece of paper is on their desk, and they're supposed to check a couple of boxes, do a few things, and that's that. So they never really see what it was that happened that preceded that piece of paper getting thrown on the desk, and they never see what happens after that. I had that opportunity to see all of it. And so I try to explain to them why this is so important, why anti-money laundering is not just some phony baloney game we're playing here. It's not just a paper, check a couple of boxes. There's reasons for all this.
Yeah.
There's bad guys out there doing really bad stuff that could affect you and your family and your community forever.
Yeah.
And that's why we're looking hard at it.
And things like if a company or a business is laundering money, it creates a business that doesn't actually have to earn profit, so it can put all of the other businesses in that space out of business. Things like that.
Oh, sure. So if you wanted to tomorrow, you decide, you want to open up a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So you open up your restaurant and you're selling a nice piece of steak, sell a steakhouse, and you sell it for $50 for the steak. And people like your food, you're a good cook, and you hired some good people, everything's going great. But a year from now, somebody opens up a restaurant right across the street from you, and he's charging $25 for the same piece of meat. Well, now your customers are going to leave you, because why are they going to pay $50 for your steak when they go across the street and pay $25? And you're thinking to yourself, how can this be? I know what it costs. I know what the rent is around here. I know what it costs to hire employees. I know what it costs to buy this meat. How can this guy sell it? Well, he doesn't care about making a profit from that, whereas you do. This is your living. He's just looking for a means that he can commingle his dirty money with some clean money. And that's why they call it a front company, because he doesn't care about the profit or no profit he makes from selling the steak. He just wants the illusion that he's selling an expensive steak and can commingle his drug money or his human trafficking money with that. So that's why it's can affect something like that.
Yeah. And then of course, your expertise is in recognizing the signs and educating people on how to prevent that, because eventually that trickles into the financial system.
Oh, exactly. It has to. I mean, that's what it all comes down to, is all these bad guys. They do all these bad things, but it's always, except for terrorists, but even they need money too. It's usually 95% of all crime is about money and making money, making a profit. So if you can put a stop to them moving their money, then you put a stop to their drug dealing or their human trafficking or whatever bad deeds that they're doing. Because if they're not making a profit from it, they're going to try something else. So that's why it's important to look at the money. And they say follow the money, and we should be doing that in every case possible. Follow the money and everything. If you could put a kibosh on the flow of the money, you stop crime.
Yeah. It's an important crime fighting tool. That's how you got into it.
That's exactly how it flowed in my direction. Yeah.
Now, you did briefly talk about it. How does this relate to terrorism and terrorism financing?
Well, historically, well, I should say historically and previously, terrorists usually only got their money through charitable donations. You would give to a certain charity. Maybe you thought that was a legitimate charity, and that some of the money was being funneled off to a certain direction, or maybe you knew right up front that it was a phony baloney charity. But that's how they usually got their funds. But now they've learned a lot of lessons from various bad criminal elements out there, and now they've learned that they can create their own crimes. So they do a lot of cyber crimes. They do a lot of credit card crimes. They do a lot of identity thefts, a lot of things, romance scams online, all that in a way that they can, now they're creating their own funds. And those funds go directly towards recruiting new candidates for terrorist armies. That goes for buying supplies, buying bullets, buying what they need. The difference between terrorism and organized crime being like the various mobs or the drug cartels, that the funding flow for those is circular, meaning that money always comes back to the Godfather. The money always comes back to the guy in charge. And they buy cool stuff. That's the whole idea of being a drug dealer. You want cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine being a drug dealer and not having my own jet. That would be.
There you go.
You know, that's what you do.
Exactly. But a terrorist, he doesn't care about the jet. He doesn't care about the Ferrari. He doesn't care about that condo in South Beach. What he cares about is the cause.
We'll be right back after a short message from our sponsor. At Arawak X, we understand that for businesses to grow, they need capital to hire staff, buy equipment, and fuel innovative ideas. We support this process by using technology, years of business acumen, and a world-class team to get business the investment they need to get to the next level. If you are a business owner and need between $100,000 and $3 million, contact us today. We will schedule a meeting over the phone or video chat. Get on the path to your dreams. Arawak X. Dream bigger.
Your printer is running at full speed. You're printing out multiple copies of the documents you're sending to customers and partners? Oh, right. One is sent, the other is filed. One is sent, one is filed. One sent, one filed. The copies go into the paper filing system so you can quickly access them at any time. Well, there isn't much space left. Why all the effort? Why not use DocuWare? While you print the document, DocuWare takes care of storage automatically. A real time saver for all involved.
Terrorist, he doesn't care about the jet. He doesn't care about the Ferrari. He doesn't care about that condo in South Beach. What he cares about is the cause. So they don't need as much money, and their flow is linear. So that money doesn't come back to a Godfather. That just goes to, goes right out to recruitment, goes right out to buying ammunition, goes right out to buying guns, goes right out to putting up new websites. So they don't need a lot. As an example of that, the 19 hijackers from 9/11 who lived in the United States for over 18 months, rent, food, entertainment, flying lessons, $450,000, the whole thing.
Wow.
Not much money at all for 19 guys living, and so it didn't cost much money. So they don't need a lot. Whereas if you look at, Pablo Escobar, he at one time was the richest man in the world.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Well, I mean,
they're still looking for his money.
Yeah. Well, they're trying. It's without understanding the way that money flows through these organizations, you would never be able to pick up $450,000. That's almost a tiny blip in the
Well, yeah.
in the grand
The-
scheme of like the U.S.'s economy.
Well, the thing is that money laundering is money laundering is money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the techniques are the same whether you end up using it for terrorism or whether you're using it to if you're the head of the Russian mob.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you're just a tax evader, some of the techniques are still the same way.
Now, what were some of you were instrumental in putting down some of the modern AML environment that exists around the world. Can you speak to a little bit about your involvement in that?
Well, because of the position I ended up in with the El Dorado Task Force, that just enabled me to go out to a lot of the banks. Part of our criteria was something called Operation Cornerstone, which was to go out to financial institutions and just talk to them. Because particularly the world changed at 9/11. You got your pre 9/11 world and your post 9/11 world.
And I feel like this COVID thing is going to be likewise.
Oh, this is yeah. I'll bring that up in a second. That's going to open up all new doors for bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, this whole COVID-19, every morning is Christmas morning for a bad guy.
Yeah.
With this stuff, there's so many new things that they.
Yeah. Well, let's put a pin in that. Continue.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after 9/11, a lot of rules and regulations had to come in play.
Mm-hmm.
The regulators started really looking hard at the banks, institutions. They weren't sure how to do things. How do we write these SARs? I mean, that's still a question to this day.
Mm-hmm.
How do you write a proper SAR?
A SAR is a
suspicious activity report.
Okay.
That's in I'm not sure what they call in the Bahamas.
No, we're
might be a suspicious transaction report.
Yeah.
But you have the same thing, but it might be called something different.
Yeah. And the purpose of them, people, is just because financial institutions can tell when suspicious things happen, and if you don't have a proper story, like it's if you're making $500 a week and grandma gives you $5,000, it's gonna do a blip. They'll say, "Why'd you get this?" "Oh, grandma," and then they'll fill that out, and then it moves on.
Yeah.
But if you're getting $5,000 transactions from grandma because grandma died 5 times, there's obviously
got a lot of grandmas.
Yes, a lot of grandmas. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, well, I used to enjoy the excuses some of the bad guys would give me, because as you know, that there's always 99% of the time there's a paper trail.
Mm-hmm.
So when a bad guy would say to me, when I said, "Where'd you get the money?" and he'd say, "Well, I won it." And I said, "Okay, well, where did you win it?" He said, "Well, I won at the track." "What track?" "What race?" "What horse did you bet on?" "When did this happen?"
Yeah.
You have a copy of that check, because I'm pretty sure that at the track or at the casino, wherever it might be, they didn't give you cash.
No.
In $1 million, they gave you a check.
Yeah.
So let's see, where did you deposit it? I didn't get it. Grandma gave it to me. All right. So grandma gave it to you. All right. Where did grandma get it from? All right. So you had it under a mattress? What, for 45 years, grandma had $10 million under a mattress.
I mean, if we could all have grandmas like that.
Yeah. Of course, then I look at the serial numbers and realize, well, those serial numbers just came out, last year. So grandma didn't have this under a mattress. So there's, you keep looking into it. There's always
and you had something, and in this jurisdiction, we kind of dread the whole FATCA thing. Could you explain your involvement in that?
Yeah. Well, FATA is the Financial Action Task Force.
FATA. Yeah.
See, the United States, we've been lucky enough here in the States that we had something called the BSA, the Bank Secrecy Act, which came out in 1970. And it just laid down a set of rules to begin with. It said, okay, don't do this. If you're a financial institution, do this, don't do that. So it was a guideline for it. But a lot of countries don't have that or didn't have anything like that. So what they did is this group called FATF, it's like an interagency group. It's not it's not any one particular government. A lot of governments send members to be part of it. And they created something, what they call the FATF 40 recommendations, which is very similar to the United States Bank Secrecy Act. And it kind of just tells you, okay, do this, don't do that. If this happens, you should do Y. You should look at that. You should look at this. So, and it covers, like I said, 40 recommendations was pretty specific. and even covered terrorist financing things also. And it was a real good entrance into the financial world for a country or a bank in a country that didn't have any rules and regulations. Because if I'm a bad guy, I'm going to try to move my money to the country with the least amount of rules and regulations. So if a country is real tough on it, I don't want to go there. That's why you hear the term tax havens or money laundering havens. And I'm not going to mention all the ones I know, just in case someone watches this and says, "Oh, I didn't know that."
but it's definitely but you know it's you know the reason that I asked you to come on the show is because it's important once our AML procedures are to the standards of, say, like America, the friction of money reduces to the point of almost, like, for example, financial institutions in the United States, they can move large amounts of money without almost no paperwork.
Yeah, well, there'll always be some kind of paperwork. But the thing now is the big thing now is beneficial ownership. There's a big push on finding out exactly who is behind a business, because for years and years and years, and this is why people registered their businesses in the States, particularly like in Delaware or Nevada, because I could put down the name of the company is ABC Limited, and then the bank didn't ask any questions about, well, who owns it, who's behind it. So it could have been Al Capone, behind that, but you wouldn't know. So now they're instituting rules on beneficial ownership, where the banks, and I should say financial institutions, not just banks, they want to understand who is behind that business. So when you walk into the institution, say, I want to open up an account, all right, what's the account? What's under my business? ABC Limited. And I say, well, who owns it? Well, that's owned by 123 Incorporated. Well, really now? Well, who owns 123? Well, 123 is owned by 7, 8, and 9. All right, well, who owns? Then they got to keep on drilling down. They didn't do that previously. And that's why it was a big gaping hole for bad guys, just to use these various companies, these LLCs, that you didn't know who the bad guy was. You didn't know. Was this guy? Was it someone on the sanction list?
Yeah.
Is it just the head of the mafia? Who is it?
Yeah, and like I say, the reason that they do all of this is because once you're in the regulated system, you can. I mean, over the recent.
Once you're in,
you can move money pretty relatively.
The hardest thing for the bad guy to do is get in. If there's a choke point in all this stuff, it's the getting in phase.
Okay, let's pivot a little bit to now that we're in this COVID space. Everything is now more so than it has to be digital, and how that is changing the AML landscape.
Yeah, well, a lot of things that are happening impact-wise. First of all, the supervision of the financial institutions is now being done on what they call desk-based inspections, because regulators aren't going out to the scene anymore. So you don't have that same type of sampling effect that you are doing online as you would from showing up in person. So that's one downside. Another downside is law enforcement. Law enforcement has more and more people doing other things now. There are more crimes, more predicate crimes being committed. There's more heinous crimes being committed. On top of the COVID in the States, there's a lot of protests going on. A lot of police are being moved over
directed to that.
Yeah. So and then even within the banks now, they're having people go out sick on COVID or being quarantined, and they're having to move things around. So suddenly now you're finding less and less people are actually looking at that financial crime stuff. So again, for the bad guy, Christmas morning.
Yeah.
For the team good guy, it's getting harder and harder. So
I think it's going to change. What we are planning on doing is to give more of the tools needed so that people, like you say, those the people that are observing these transactions can make sure that they have the information. We use AI not as a replacement of human beings, but as an enabler, so that people can say, okay, there's a suspicious pattern in this person. Just take a look at it. You know,
Right.
instead of trying to replace people. I'm not a big. I'm a fan of using technology, not using it to replace people. So I'm hopeful that's where it's going.
I understand there are some very specific problems that they might have because of the virus, and that you have to you make provisions for that. For example, just onboarding process
Yeah.
might take longer to figure out the know your customer information. Just because you ask a customer, can you get various forms of identification or articles of incorporation or whatever you're asking him, he might not be able to get it. He might be on the quarantine. Where he needs to get it might be on the quarantine. So those things you got to kind of think about for a second. Say, well, okay, maybe we have to make certain provisions for that. His government ID. What if his driver's license expired yesterday?
I think that coming from it from a practical, understanding what money laundering actually is, and coming and bringing that all the way up, you can start to make policy decisions as an organization and have those communications with regulators to tell people what it's really like, what's really going on. Like you say, how are you supposed to get a deal?
What always gets in the way, though, is somebody is going to say the word budget, and not that they shouldn't. Obviously, budget's got to be a consideration there somewhere, but that's where it's going to put the kibosh on this.
For me, we have some great inefficiencies in our system right now. Not personally, but I mean in our national system. So for me, I view technology as kind of speeding up the process. If we can get people to walk in and be able to get approved to do certain financial things within a timely manner, I think that's a great value add. So I'm not,
Sure.
we're looking to expand. So it's
Yeah, or you could even put people on like a probation period. All right, we'll onboard you, but we're not going to let you move anything more than X amount of dollars until we can do all our proper.
Yeah, exactly. It's
do that then.
It's policies like that where, like I say, AML is important. It has to happen, but it doesn't have to be so rigid that it flies in the face of the end user, which is the legitimate business and the legitimate person.
And most people, a good 98% of it is going to be legitimate.
I'd probably say even 99%. I would say most people.
Probably. Yeah, probably.
It's just those few people that.
Those few could be a killer though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You better. Yeah, and I think people this is the realest. When you think of the compliance and AML department, you don't think of this much energy and this much. But it's because he understands it from the ground up. This is real, and it's important. It's very important for the financial services industry, especially.
I know why that piece of paper is sitting on your desk. Why that alert got kicked out. I understand it, and I understand what happens afterwards. And I understand who these bad guys are. And look, I hope there's a special place in hell for some of these bad guys. Some of the stuff I've seen, and that's why I kind of get passionate about it. I goof around a lot. Because I don't take myself serious, but I take my job very serious. So.
Why don't you tell the audience where people can find you? You're a consultant.
I'm at www.amltrainer.com. And I'm also you go on my YouTube channel, look up AML Training Academy, and I have a bunch of podcasts on there. And I'm also working on right now a series of e-training modules that you'll be able to purchase and learn about a lot of this stuff.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
That was Kevin Sullivan from AML Training Academy. We'll see you next time.
I look outside my window and nothing seems the same. I hear their voices howling, and I feel the winds of change. Every generation a challenge they must face.